Katie had always felt the weight of being the ignored Logan sister, the one who remained in the background while Brooke grabbed attention and Donna pursued her own dramatic pathways. Katie had spent years in Los Angeles, a city of glitter and reinvention, working for Forrester Creations and Spencer Publications, her life entangled with high fashion, media empires, and complicated familial relationships. She had survived heart transplants, betrayals, marriages that disintegrated under the weight of secrets, and the perpetual tug-of-war between her blood family and the mighty Forrester dynasty. But ambition had a way of surfacing unexpectedly, and for Katie, it came in the guise of a long-held dream, her own fashion label, Logan, that would stand out from the shadow of Forrester Creations. The concept originated simply enough, prompted by chats with Eric Forrester at a time when his health was deteriorating and his future at his own company appeared doubtful. Eric, the iconic designer whose name has defined luxury in Los Angeles for decades, had confided in Katie, offering designs and ideas that felt new and untouched. There were no formal contracts at first, only trust, a handshake, and the silent understanding that if he ever needed an outlet outside of Forrester Creations, Katie would supply one. Others saw risk, but she saw opportunity. She maintained that the Logan name had history. It represented her family's warmth and resilience, as opposed to the Forrester's polished, sometimes harsh elegance. Securing the trademark had been simple, almost too easy, given how long it had been out of use. Katie threw her efforts into creating something fresh, something her own. Bill Spencer, her ex-husband and the father of her son Will, proved to be an unexpected ally. Dollar Bill, as the business dubbed him, was wealthy, influential, and possessed a streak of rebellion that matched her own rising tenacity. He recognized the possibility of disruption, a competing firm that may challenge Forrester's dominance, and backed her ambition with financing and unwavering confidence. They put together a crew, booked a venue for the inaugural exhibition, and planned to launch Logan as a brand that offered affordable luxury with a heartfelt edge. Katie envisioned collections that combined timeless styles with a current sensibility, things that women like her, strong, scarred, yet hopeful, could wear with pride. She saw runway lights illuminating Logan dresses, the name flashing in large letters, a declaration that the Logans could survive independently. The first few days felt electrifying. Katie immersed herself into every aspect, selecting textiles, evaluating Eric's first sketches, coordinating with publicists, and even taking on the position of CEO with the composure she had earned during years of PR work at Forrester. She held meals where investors and designers meet, and laughter drowned out the anxiety. Brooke, her sister, watched from afar, concerned and uneasy. The Logan name had always been associated with Brooke in the public eye, Brooke Logan, the face of so many Forrester campaigns, and Katie's move felt like a quiet reclamation, or possibly a challenge. Rich Forrester, who was very protective of his family's legacy, was outraged by the prospect of competition from inside the extended family circle. Whispers circulated around the industry. Was Katie biting the hand that fed her for so long? As preparations progressed, fissures appeared. Eric's involvement grew problematic when his commitment to Forrester Creations drew him back. Health concerns, family pressures, and the gravitational power of his own empire caused him to reconsider his devotion. Verbal agreements were weak in a world that expected firm commitments. Katie persisted, believing that the designs Eric had revealed related to the vision they had created together. Bill pressed her on, claiming that they had the authority to produce the line. The first fashion show loomed as a crucial deadline that might make or break everything. Katie stood backstage on the night of the debut, heart pumping, seeing models slip into dresses with Eric's distinct touch. The lights dimmed, the music intensified, and the runway came to life. "There's a new name in Los Angeles fashion," Bill said from the front row, his voice echoing around the room. "Logan." It worked briefly. Applause echoed throughout the crowd. Critics wrote comments, customers leaned forward, and Katie took a deep sigh of pride. But success in LA fashion is transitory. Rumors had already circulated, alleging that the designs had been borrowed without complete authorization and that the Logan name was being used to undermine its own past. Brooke and Ridge, seated among the attendees, exchanged disapproving looks. Post-show exchanges became tense, with issues raised about intellectual property and whether Eric had genuinely signed off on the usage of his work. The drama piqued the interest of the press, which is always looking for scandal. Headlines speculated about family feuds turning into legal battles and a startup doomed by its own audacity. Katie attempted to hold the line. She published announcements emphasizing the Logan brand's independence and pointing out that Forrester Creations had never fully utilized the name. She relied on Bill's resources to shore up finances, investing more in marketing and manufacturing. However, the sector is unforgiving of newbies without solid underpinnings. Investors were hesitant as legal clouds grew. Suppliers demanded assurances. Sales expectations collapsed as prospective clients chose the recognized safety of Forrester lines. Katie spent sleepless nights going over spreadsheets that showed rising debts, fabric prices, venue fees, and wages for a crew she had hired with optimism. The amount of $3 million tormented her, representing a debt that grew with interest and penalties. The unraveling occurred gradually, then all at once. Eric separated himself, eventually returning to Forrester Creations during his own personal recovery. Without his name, the brand lost its creative anchor. Models and staff began to disperse, seeking stability elsewhere. Bill, who was pragmatic to a fault, warned that he could not continue to lose money indefinitely. Katie battled to keep the dream alive by redesigning collections herself with the assistance of younger talent she had enlisted, but the trend had shifted permanently. The Logan fashion business, once a beacon of hope, has become a cautionary story whispered in showrooms and at industry parties. Ambition without protections, family ties frayed beyond repair. Bankruptcy filings followed. Court filings showed the outstanding balances, unsuccessful launches, and assets liquidated to cover what they could. Katie sat through sessions with lawyers, signing paperwork that marked the end. The showroom had been cleared, and the racks that had previously held samples were now empty. She packed boxes in quiet, each a reminder of what may have been. Los Angeles, with its unending brightness and relentless pace, suddenly felt oppressive. The city that had offered her second opportunities now resounded with the sting of defeat. Every avenue reminded her of runways she'd never walk again, and every billboard featured competitors who had outlasted her. She made her decision discreetly. There would be no spectacular farewell or news conference to explain her departure. Katie arranged for Will to remain with Bill during transitions and promised regular visits. She sold what remained of her Beverly Hills holdings and downsized her life to fit into a few suitcases. Friends and relatives offered compassion and guidance, but Katie needed space. Brooke reached out, her voice quiet and concerned, but the schism between them had grown into something neither understood how to mend right now. Katie thanked her sister and promised to talk soon, but the words were hollow against the ache of what had been lost. The sky over Los Angeles remained the same pristine blue the day she left. Katie drove to the airport alone, the radio turned off, and the hum of traffic filled the solitude. She recalled the child she had been when she first returned to the city years before, tentative, recuperating, and happy for any seat at the table. She reflected on the woman she had become, brave enough to claim a legacy, yet tough enough to face its demise. Failure, she understood, was not the inverse of success. It was part of the same continuum, a chapter that formed all that came after. She got on the plane without looking back. The engine screamed, taking her away from the sprawling freeways, the gleaming hills, and the world she had battled so hard to dominate. Katie Logan, once characterized by her role in Los Angeles fashion and family drama, now craved something more simple. Tranquility, possibly in a calmer city where names held less weight, where she could rebuild without the constant focus of scrutiny. The jet rose higher, and the city dwindled beneath her, a sparkling reminder of goals pursued and dreams abandoned. Rumors swirled in Los Angeles for months thereafter. Some claimed she had relocated to a tiny beach town in the north, while others speculated on a move to Europe or a full withdrawal from public life. Katie remained mute, allowing the story to dissipate as other scandals dominated the news. She strolled beaches at dawn, read novels she had never had time for, and reunited with aspects of herself that had been neglected for too long. The fashion world moved on, as it often does, but Katie took Logan's teachings with her, not as a scar, but as confirmation of her ability to take risks, even when the consequences were harsh. Years later, when asked what happened to Katie Logan after the brand failed, the responses were different. Some mentioned bankruptcy and heartbreak, while others recalled her courage in stepping away. But Katie, wherever she went, knew the truth. She had left Los Angeles not in failure, but in search of a life that didn't involve proving herself on a runway. The city lights faded in her rearview mirror, and for the first time in decades, the road ahead felt free, unscripted, and completely her own. Katie stood near her office's wide window for the final time, gazing out at the familiar skyline of Los Angeles. The late afternoon sun cast golden bands across the skyscrapers, illuminating a metropolis that had once felt like the focal point of her entire existence. For years, she believed that every opportunity, dream, and tragedy had led her to this point. Now, as she grasped a cardboard box containing the last relics of her profession, the city appeared curiously distant, as if it had only existed in her memories. Logan fashion had once been her source of pride. She remembered the day she revealed it with anxious excitement, confident that she could produce something profound and long-lasting. It had felt like the start of a new chapter, one in which she would emerge from the lengthy shadows of her family's achievements and create something entirely her own. But somewhere along the process, the vision started to unravel. At first, the issues were minor: a delayed shipment, conflicts with suppliers, and growing manufacturing expenses. Katie had attempted to dismiss them, reminding herself that every firm faces difficulties in its early stages. She worked longer hours, spent more money on marketing, and attempted to persuade investors that the setbacks were temporary. For a while, it appeared that things would improve. Industry insiders gave the first collection a moderate applause. A few stores issued cautious orders. Fashion websites highlighted the brand in passing, frequently highlighting its potential. Katie clung to those minor triumphs, using them as motivation during the long evenings she spent examining budgets and adjusting strategy. However, the momentum never really arrived. Each season introduced fresh designs, marketing, and hopes. Each season offered poor sales results. The market was harsh, and Los Angeles, despite its glitz, was not an easy place to start a fashion business from scratch. Katie had tried everything she could think of. She worked with influencers, revamped the brand's design, and even changed the pricing plan to appeal to a larger audience. Nonetheless, the numbers continued to decline. Eventually, the investors began asking more difficult questions. Meetings that had previously been filled with enthusiasm gradually became tense. Financial projections were analyzed. Marketing plans were challenged. Katie could see the mistrust developing in their eyes, and with each passing month, she felt the weight of their expectations bear down on her shoulders. She never wanted to admit it, but the truth began to sink in long before the ultimate decision was made. The brand was failing. The announcement was concise and clinical. Operations would end, outstanding orders would be fulfilled, and the company would be liquidated within weeks. Katie had nodded calmly and composedly during the discussion, despite the fact that something inside her was slowly breaking. After that, she walked into the virtually empty office area, where mannequins still represented the last unfinished collection. Fabrics hung on racks, doodles adorned the walls, while sewing machines remained idle. All of it reflected years of work, dreams, and sacrifice. It now felt like a museum dedicated to an impossibly distant future. The hardest thing was informing her family. The Logans had always been extremely supportive of one another, but their prosperity also created a subtle pressure. Many of them had established successful jobs and business operations. Katie had hoped to stand beside them with something she had crafted herself. When she finally told them what had happened, they listened without judgment. There were embraces, encouraging words, and assurances that failure did not define her. Still, Katie couldn't shake the feeling that she had let them down. In the following weeks, Los Angeles began to feel different. The city's vibrancy, which had before inspired me, now seemed overwhelming. Every street corner brought back memories of meetings she'd attended, events she'd hosted, or possibilities that had passed her by. The billboards selling expensive brands felt like quiet reminders of the world she had attempted to enter, but failed to dominate. Friends suggested she take some time off and regroup. Some thought she'd eventually create another brand. Others speculated that she may go into consultancy or join an established fashion house. Katie smiled nicely whenever such recommendations were made. But deep inside, she knew she needed something altogether different. One evening, she wandered along the beach, watching waves crash against the coast as the sun set beyond the horizon. The sound of the water had always helped to cleanse her mind. That night, it also helped her make a decision she had been delaying. She was planning to depart Los Angeles. Not for a quick break or transient escape. Permanently. The concept felt both terrible and wonderfully empowering. For years, she had associated her identity with the city and the industry it represented. Walking away felt like closing the door on the version of herself she had worked so hard to achieve. Another part of her wondered if leaving would open a fresh door she hadn't considered before. The next few days were a whirl of practical arrangements. She sold furniture, packed boxes, and completed documentation regarding the company's liquidation. Each activity felt like a modest step toward a future she couldn't yet envision. Katie strolled around her empty apartment as the moving truck loaded up the last of her stuff. The rooms echoed softly with each step, emptied of the life she had created there. She paused in the living room, where she had previously celebrated the brand's launch with friends and family. Laughter and music flooded the room that night. Everyone believed they were witnessing the start of something remarkable. Katie ran her hand over the wall, recalling how excited she had been. Then she turned away. Her final day in Los Angeles began calmly. There were no dramatic goodbyes or huge farewell parties. She met a few close pals for coffee, embraced them tightly, and pledged to keep in touch. When the time came to leave, she drove through the city one final time. The familiar streets evoked memories of both achievement and sadness. The fashion district, where she had previously spent hours selecting materials, passed by her window. The restaurant where she had toasted her early accomplishments flashed momentarily before vanishing behind traffic. Eventually, the skyline receded from her rearview mirror. Katie felt both sad and relieved as the miles stretched ahead of her. She had spent so much time trying to prove something to the industry, to her family, and to herself. Now she was letting go of the struggle. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, she felt a peaceful sense of hope. Failure had pushed her to face uncomfortable truths about desire, identity, and the fragility of success. It had also reminded her that life was more than just one desire. The sun rose again somewhere outside the city limits, spreading a thin light across the highway. Katie tightened her hold on the steering wheel and took a calm breath. Los Angeles had been a pivotal chapter in her life, teaching her valuable lessons that she would cherish with her forever. But it was no longer where her future lay. That future existed beyond the horizon she was traveling toward. And while she had no idea what she would find there, Katie was positive of one thing. Leaving did not mean the end. It was just the beginning of a different existence. Katie kept driving even after the city lights had faded behind her. The highway stretched eternally ahead, flanked by peaceful hills and small villages that appeared unaffected by the restless energy she had left behind. The rhythm of the road gave her time to ponder, which she had rarely done during the busy years of establishing the Logan fashion brand. Back then, every day was meticulously planned. Meetings, fabric selection, photo shoots, investor calls, marketing reviews. Her entire life had revolved around ensuring the brand's success. She often convinced herself that once the company was established, she would be able to calm down and enjoy the present moment. That moment never came. Instead, the continual pressure gradually sapped the delight she formerly felt while sketching new designs or debating innovative ideas. What began as passion soon became obligation, and then anxiety. Katie recognized how fatigued she had become now that she only had the wide road ahead of her. She arrived at a quiet roadside cafe shortly after morning. The space was small, with only a few tables and the welcoming aroma of fresh coffee in the air. No one recognized her name or knew anything about the unsuccessful brand she had spent years attempting to establish. For the first time in a long time, she felt invisible in the best sense. Katie sat at the window, holding a warm cup of coffee, and watched the morning light spread across the vacant parking lot. The world appeared tranquil, even pleasant. She wasn't sure where she'd settle or what her next profession would entail. The future remained unknown, but it no longer felt like a burden she had to bear alone. Instead, it felt like an open place waiting to be discovered. Katie understood deep down that leaving Los Angeles had not eradicated her dreams, but rather allowed them to shift.